Hello, thank you very much for joining us today, and welcome to this Debating Europe's expert panel discussion on water resilience. My name is Luke Callahan-White, and I have the pleasure to moderate today's discussion on behalf of Debating Europe, which is the citizen engagement unit of the Brussels-based think tank Friends of Europe. That's where I work as a program manager for climate and energy. So in late 2023, Debating Europe ran a massive citizen consultation project called 2024 Voices, Citizens Speak Up, with over 2,000 citizens participating from 7 EU countries: Belgium, France, Germany, Italy, Poland, Spain, and Sweden, with the aim to gauge their fears and hopes on 4 big challenges of our time: climate change, security, the economy, and democracy. And you can find the report online by going to debatingeurope.eu. Got myself a hard copy here. And the report was launched at the European Parliament final in the Strasbourg session on the 28th of February. Now, as a follow-up, Debating Europe is organizing a series of engagements, both locally in those 7 countries I mentioned, and hosting online discussions such as this one. The idea being to contribute to meaningful and citizen-led discussions that can also inform the public debate on some key issues in advance of the elections taking place this June from the 6th until the 9th. And so these online panel discussions allow us to facilitate exchanges with policymakers, leaders from the private sector, and civil society experts. I'm delighted that we're joined by representatives from those 3 categories today, and I'm going to introduce the panel in just a moment. As I mentioned, one of the 4 thematic areas that the 2024 Voices campaign addressed was that of climate change. And in this vein, in the context of the ecological transformation and the Green Deal, one of the key issues facing us is the question of water resilience. The 2024 Voices report highlights that citizen participants, especially in Poland, Spain, and France, identified water scarcity as a major concern for the future. And equally, participants acknowledge that, yes, climate change has become a more prominent topic in politics and society in recent years, but there was an expression that, well, maybe it's all talk and very little action. So I guess this panel discussion is a timely discussion for many reasons, not least because of the attention that citizens gave to the issue of water resilience in the 2024 Voices report. But also, our discussion is taking place in the context of the EU's Green Week, running over the course of the 29th and the 30th of May this year. And it's organized as part of a wider communications campaign on that very question, water resilience. So we know that it's a pressing policy objective in Europe. We know that it deserves consideration. We know that citizens across the EU are talking about it. So I'm delighted that we have around 25 to 30 minutes today to discuss it with 3 really expert figures to lend their insights on the matter. I'm really pleased to welcome Claudia Olazabal, Head of Unit of Sustainable Freshwater Management, the European Commission's Directorate General for Environment. Claudia, you're very welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here.
It's our pleasure. Also joined by Philip Hebrecht, who is the fundraising manager at Natuurpunt, with a focus on wetland restoration. Philip, great to have you with us today as well.
Thank you for the invitation. Pleasure to be here.
And Wouter Vermeulen, who is Vice President for Sustainability and Public Policy Europe at the Coca-Cola Company. Wouter, you're most welcome.
Thanks for the invite. And if you wonder what the tagline is, I will go down and you can read it. So
options exist. The choice is yours.
Exactly.
Well, maybe jumping right on that, thinking about this in the context of the European elections, and to get straight into the matter at hand, Claudia, can I turn to you? Can you give us an overview of the work that the European Commission is currently doing to develop a comprehensive approach to water management, and perhaps your work on forging a water-smart economy?
Okay. We are doing a lot, and we've been doing a lot for many years, but not only in the Commission, but also in the EU. So we have, since the 70s, a very strong body of laws, one of the strongest in the world, very much focused on pollution, but also increasingly so also on water quantity. Because for us, it's very important to tackle the 2 things at the same time, because they are intimately linked. So we have very strong legislation. which unfortunately, and given the number of infringement cases and court rulings that we have, is not fully implemented. So that is already a problem. But we do see that already we have problems, or we're struggling with sometimes mismanagement, pollution, overexploitation, wastage of water, leakages, etc. And now all these will be exacerbated at a very high pace because of climate change. So we have also been tackling water scarcity and floods, but we realize that we would really need to do the extra mile. And do the extra mile not only in terms of efforts, which is clear, but also in terms of governance. And I think we're going to dwell on that also with the two other panelists. We will need a massive effort on changing the governance on water. So we're also looking at how can we improve the governance, and also we are also looking at how to improve the economics of water, because at the heart of the matter is that perhaps, or surely, we are not giving water the value it has. Not only the price, but actually the value it has, and that has triggered into a number of problems. So now we are, of course, working very much on implementation of the current legislation. We have modernized a number of key pieces of legislation under the Green Deal. Of course, the drinking water, the urban wastewater treatment, the industrial emissions directive. We have put in place the water reuse for agriculture, wastewater reuse for agriculture. So there's a number of modernization of a new legislation. This is a body of legislation that needs to constantly evolve. So modernization, implementation. We're also looking at what member states are doing. So we will be in the months to come publish a report on the implementation of the floods and water frame directive, which basically would give a snapshot of the state of the waters in the EU and what member states are doing about it. The idea being that this snapshot, really a very accurate picture of how the situation is, will be fed into the new college. And of course, the new college will, on the basis of that picture, see what are the necessary steps to be taken to achieve what we have all collectively before the New York conference decided, which is to be water resilience by 2050.
Thank you for that. Well, so thinking about it from your point of view, for Coca-Cola, obviously, water policy is very important to you and to your colleagues. Can you say a little bit more, perhaps, about why that's the case? And as EU citizens go to the polls pretty soon, as your background reminds us, do you expect that water resilience will be high on the political agenda of the incoming mandate?
Thanks, Luke. And I would want to put the water resilience discussion within the broader context of nature restoration, and then obviously from there into climate. So I think everyone will be familiar with the statistic that over half of the world's GDP is actually dependent on nature, right? If you just look at the services from freshwater ecosystems, they're being estimated at more than 11 trillion euros in the EU, which is 2.5 times the German GDP. That's a report from WWF from a while ago. So the whole food and beverage industry obviously relies on nature. The beverage industry relies on water. We can make Coca-Cola without sugar. It's called Coke Zero. We can sell it without packaging and dispensed solutions. You know, beverages without water is slightly more complicated. So water security is among our global sustainability priorities because it's essential for life, our beverages, and the communities in which we operate. A recent report from the European Environment Agency actually highlighted that already today, 30% of people in Southern Europe live in water-stressed areas. And we will see that increase for the reasons that Claudia referenced to. So I think it's going to be vital that we make progress on water security, not only because of its economical impacts, but also because our consumers and our citizens care. You know, safe water, nature depletion rank among the top 3 global concerns on sustainability from a research from GlobeScan. All of our consumer insights tell us how concerned people are with water. And I think it's also because water and nature is a little bit more tangible and relatable than climate, which is a little bit more, or carbon discussions rather, which is a little bit more technocratic, carbon border adjustment mechanism, carbon capture and storage. it's more difficult, right, than rebuilding and restoring nature. So the economical driver is there, the consumer support is there. As we go into the elections and the next mandate of the Commission, I would also argue that maybe the solution is not in terms of more legislation, but also in implementing what we already have, and actually looking to foster, multi-stakeholder collaborations between the public sector, the industry, ourselves and other partners in our industry, and obviously civil society. So it's not always that we're going to solve a problem by throwing more legislation at the problem. Maybe we need to throw more partnership and creative ideas at the problem that might also get us a long way.
Philip Wouter there, he contextualized water resilience firstly in the context of nature restoration and then in the discussion around climate change, the existential question facing us, of course, this moment. When we think about, the economical impacts, the fact that we know that citizens care deeply about this question, we have a suite of regulatory tools that we've been working on in Europe, as Claudia outlined, since the 1970s. We've been updating them, we've been modifying them in the context of the European Green Deal. And we know that there's an urgency here as well, because Wouter, you were highlighting that European Environment Agency report, and one of the key findings on the nexus between climate, water, and health is really the mental health impact that a lot of these water-based extreme weather events have on communities right across Europe. So I have a similar question to you than for the one that I had for Wouter as well, but it's, when we think about, what's really driving the agenda at the moment in the general zeitgeist, we think about competitiveness, we think about defense, and these are key pillars that may well have, a serious weight behind them, politically speaking, in the next mandate. When we take all that together, from the perspective of Natuurpunt, an organization working to protect vulnerable and threatened nature here in Flanders in Belgium, how can we ensure that water resilience and all of the constituent parts of it really remains at the front of the political agenda?
I think that the actual situation, like recently proven, will help us definitely to put the water stress again on the agenda. I don't know if you followed a bit the news through Europe, but there is water stress, water abundance with the catastrophes that go with it in France. There was this weekend in Flanders again, in Holland. So, I mean, the actual situation of our climate and our disturbance due to the climate change is on the agenda every time again. I think the last 6 months in Flanders only, we had almost 3 water catastrophes in different regions. So it's always coming back, in fact. So nevertheless, the efforts of some lobby groups and some economic players that want to get it off the agenda, I think it will definitely always come back as long as we don't take it seriously and integrate it within the whole spectrum of climate solutions and water-related solutions. So we should take this all together. And nature, of course, shows the way, in the sense that nature-based solutions are the best solutions that tackle all these challenges on water, on climate, on well-being. That's where we believe as an NGO, as a social society organization, that we definitely would need to bring nature more on top of the agenda. And unfortunately, I think we have a large coalition already. When I hear Wouter and Claudia speaking, I feel like strongly connected, and we have definitely the same conviction. But sometimes politicians don't always listen to what civil society or front runners, companies, and even their own administrations present them. So I think it's time that our politicians stop playing some panic football, if I might use that, but really definitely listen to their stakeholders. We did it for COVID. We listened to a lot of stakeholders, and specifically the science world was in front of that, and we all took their recommendations seriously. Now it's time to do the same for nature and water action.
When we think about the response to COVID, one of the successes facing, given the challenges and the unprecedented nature of the challenges that was faced, was really the capacity to break down certain silos. And what I'm gathering from the three of you is the importance of this holistic approach in which stakeholders are integrated in emphasizing the action that needs to take place. And you mentioned there that taking it all together, nature-based solution can help really emphasize and drive the action forward. But I want to stay with breaking down silos for a moment. And Claudia, can I come back to you, because you stressed in your earlier remarks the importance of emphasizing governance, and also, of course, the economics of water and the value that it has. When it comes to devising and implementing these water policies, Wouter said we don't need new legislation. It's about maybe more implementing what we have there. How can we better integrate some of the cross-cutting cleavages that we see in climate change, in health, in biodiversity, so that we have coherent implementation of the legislation which already exists?
Before I reply to this question, I will say something on how to keep this in the agenda, because that water would be in the agenda, I think both Philip and Wouter was saying, it's got to be there. But the problem is whether we tackle it through a water resilience or just a crisis management and short-term solution. So that the problem will be there, I don't think anybody doubts it. And we have the scientific evidence that this is going to be in the media one day and the other day and the other day. It's rather how we tackle the problem, and that links very much to NBS, because we've seen, for instance, when we've had floods, even in countries like Slovenia, which were very nature-based solution minded, with a very nature-based solution population, when the horrible and cataclysmic floods came in, the decision was, no, we don't go for this. We need to quickly go for grey infrastructures that people would see immediately, a big wall in front of their assets, feel protected, and so they even long-term, well-thought planning decisions could all of a sudden be turned over by a bit of a panic situation in the face of extremely difficult situations. So I wouldn't underestimate those. So it's about how we will be as EU approaching the fact that water will be in the media all the time. No? And so in terms of governance and how to make people participate, what we see, and that actually I'm giving you a preview, because this will be published the same day as we will be published the Eurobarometer that and has questions on water. We see two things. First, half of the people do not think they are well informed about water. And we're not surprised about this, because water management is a massive machinery. It's a very technical issue, extremely complex, that relies on many different administrative levels, many different actors. So for people to feel equipped to engage in that very technical and sometimes very cryptic, they don't feel equipped. So when member states do their public consultation or the River Basin Management Plan, which is basically the main planning tool, they say what we get there is really the Illuminatis that know about the Water Framework Directive, no? Because people don't feel equipped. And so there is a massive effort to educate and equip the people to understand the complexity, so that they can really get engaged and feel that they feel sufficiently comfortable and empowered to discuss. When I receive any visitors or any group that wants to have a chat, I almost always, unless they're really experts, start by showing them the water cycle. That's the basics, how the water cycle works, how the water from the sea makes it to inland and keeps moving inland through the different ecosystems, and how the different ecosystems, what they do is store and release water, so that eventually it moves inland. No? And how come thousands of kilometers away from the sea we still have water? So all these people need to understand. The moment they understand this, then something clicks into their mind, and then they see all the connections. But of course, this requires, and that's why we're doing campaigns. That other companies are doing campaigns, local authorities are doing campaigns, equipping the people for the very hard discussions we're going to have in Europe, so that they really engage. So there's a massive involvement of first raising awareness, equipping actors to get involved, which do not feel now equipped. And the second thing I would say is mapping, because what we realized, and then I had when we started the discussions on water resilience, and we had this, what we call in our jargon, inter-service group, we finally found 60 or almost 70 people who were working across the organization in their little corner on water. And the same would go for a big company, I'm sure. In Coca-Cola, if you start mapping who are the people who are working on with water-related issues, there are the obvious ones on the production, but also other satellite departments that are working on water, and already mapping the people that are affected or interested parties is really a prerequisite to have an inclusive governance.
We're privileged to have this this information that's going to be coming out soon. I think it's extremely relevant in thinking, Wouter, about this question again of going back to breaking down silos. Claudia, you've highlighted there the importance of ensuring that we're raising awareness and empowering people to feel equipped to deal with these challenges, but also the importance of simply mapping out the stakeholders and interested parties. Wouter, what do you see as the role of the private sector in helping to break down these silos and fostering more holistic policy framing for water resilience in Europe?
Sure. Well, first of all, I think any company or sector that has an important water footprint, should first take meaningful actions themselves. So our overarching goal is actually to give back to nature the equivalent amount of water that we use in our finished beverages. We set that goal. We met it in 2015, 5 years ahead of the target end date, and we're still delivering more water back to nature than we use in our beverages. The last account was at 159%. And then secondly, I would argue that all companies involved need to adopt water stewardship standards like the AWS or equivalent systems. So I think there's an important need for companies with an important water footprint to actually up their game and to be clear on their water risks and put water stewardship strategies into place. But obviously, our water footprint extends beyond our four walls. For our company, an important part of the water footprint is related to ingredients. And then we go into agriculture and helping farmers to actually reduce their water usage, to actually reduce runoff, to reduce the use of pesticides, so that we also take care of water quality, because it's not about quantity, it's also about water quality, as Claudia said before. And then finally, we engage with partners across Europe in local context-based programs, very often nature-based solutions for water replenishment, as we call them. And one of the programs we are running is actually to protect and restore the Danube in partnership with WWF Central and Eastern Europe, with the support of the Coca-Cola Foundation. And it's a massive program running for more than 10 years now that has actually restored floodplains and wetlands, that actually has replenished more than 13 million cubic meters of water. But importantly, it is actually delivering a lot of proof points of how local communities can benefit from nature-based solutions like flood protection for farmers by restoring wetlands. So I think a part of the solution is actually to campaign and explain better what is happening already and the benefits of those programs. I agree that in the case of a catastrophe like in Slovenia or here in the Low Countries, yes, there will be a desire to invest in infrastructure. And with 23% of treated water leaking away, there is a case for certain targeted investments. But on the long term, we need to highlight, the positives of nature-based solutions. Because if I relate this back to the report that you referenced at the beginning, what young people are saying across Europe is we need to change the narrative, right? And the amazing thing about nature is, and Philip is more an expert than I am, but nature can be restored, right? So I think we're all in need of a positive, right? I think we're all aware of the problem and the challenges ahead. But optimism is a moral duty. But I do hope that by highlighting the positive impacts, that over time we will gain broader support across society, even with the difficult to convince groups that may not always be that sympathetic to this whole agenda.
Thanks, Wouter. Philip, as we've discussed already, we know water is going to be there in the next mandate. It's the question of how we're dealing with it. Are we going to be focused only on emergency preparedness, or is it going to be a more coherent framework? But I think just jumping off what Wouter was just saying there about how we're bringing together people around this narrative, recognizing, yes, in fact, nature can be restored. This isn't a fait accompli. What's your perspective on this? We've also heard the two different points of view, both from Claudia and Wouter there, on breaking down silos. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on those 2 points.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm very happy that Wouter referred to this positive narrative, because it was also something that I kept in mind from the Voices report, that people want to see and hear those positive stories and those good examples. And I think that there is definitely an opportunity for NGOs and private companies, and especially also in combination with the support of the administration, that we should definitely learn to work together. But therefore, we need to tear down first the walls that are often existing between private and NGO sectors. I refer a bit to the activist, militant position that sometimes our NGOs take in, and they kind of blame the industry or blame private sector for this and that. But let's turn it around and let's say, okay, how can we find a common ground there to move forward together? And that's a bit what we do with Natuurpunt. Of course, we see that there are differences in approach or in the priorities between the NGOs and private sector, but we see also a lot of similarities and a lot of concerns. And as Wouter said, water is so important for the whole society that we should take this as a lever to work together and move forward on where we can understand each other. And this asks sometimes some learning to speak each other's language, to listen to each other, to understand each other, and definitely to look what we have in common. And I can refer to some very good experiences that we have since the last 8 years with multinational companies. And fortunately for the moment, especially multinationals are ready for moving forward. To local smaller companies are a bit reluctant to that, but I'm definitely convinced that this will come. So yeah, let's break down the walls that exist, and let's listen to each other and see where we can find each other on realizing sometimes smaller projects first, to learn to each other, learn from each other, and learn to work, learn to understand, and find this common path forward. And then afterwards we can move on a more ambitious common program.
And if I may interject, look, just to build on Philip's point, to give another data point, is through the partnership and the funding from the Coca-Cola Foundation with WWF, by and large, it was like close to 5 million euros, but that has actually enabled WWF to unlock another 20 million from the European Commission, right? So that is a real life example of how, partnerships between the private sector and NGOs can actually also bring in then the public sector, and the great opportunity that we have to work together to scale up solutions. So again, thanks to the Commission for leveraging and amplifying the work.
A great example of the multiplier effect. And I guess one of the kind of the final point that I think would be great to address in the context of this conversation is really moving from talk to action. That was something that really emerged in the 2024 Citizen Speak Up report. Philip, can I stay with you on this? You said there it's imperative that we start tearing down the walls and learning to speak each other's languages, starting small and scaling up with projects that we have. But your network, as I've mentioned, plays a really significant role across nature solutions. And I wondered if you're looking to governments to implement what your research is showing, to implement what you're advocating. From your experience, and maybe for those who are joining us on this call from the NGO sector, do you have advice or inspiration about what can catalyze action, what really galvanizes policymakers to take the decisions and the actions that you're promoting?
I would think the politicians should learn to listen to the democratic process, because when I refer, for example, to the whole process that has the nature restoration law has run through, we see that there is a support from society, there is a support from democratic levels, but at the end, due to some pressure from minority groups, in this case the agro industry, they kind of didn't respect the democratic process. So that I think it's important that our politicians respect the democratic process and all the stakeholders that are involved in this one. So that is definitely something that should be put forward. At the same time, I think with, for example, NGOs and companies that work together with the support of European Commission or local governments, we show that we can make the difference. We prove in the project that we realize that we can make a difference and that it works. So that should then, I think, convince also politicians and decision makers that often even with budgets that are minor to infrastructure budgets, so with cheaper solutions, because nature-based solutions are often much cheaper than infrastructure solutions, that we can definitely make a difference in this whole discussion. And to end, I think water has everything in it to kind of create a collective around, in the sense that all actors in society, all stakeholders in society depend on water. So for me, it's definitely a topic that could unite everybody, more even than, for example, biodiversity, because as an NGO, of course, that works on nature conservation, biodiversity is our core business. But there we feel that a lot of people don't understand what's the importance of a good biodiversity and a healthy ecosystem. But for water, they definitely can feel and see it every day. So I think water has everything in it to unite people around it.
It's an optimistic note as we're coming to the end of our discussion. Well, I wanted to go back to the 2024 Voices report again. I found it interesting that a lot of participants from across the 7 member states that we're targeting were focusing on the potential role of artificial intelligence in monitoring water usage. And we've touched on it already a few times in our conversation about the importance of bringing in the different stakeholders. Philip, you've already said it's a uniting factor amongst us. But I'd be interested to hear from Coca-Cola if you have any examples of other cross-sector collaborations to drive water resilience. You've spoken about the public-private partnerships, the work that you've done with WWF. Is there another one that comes to light, or an example of how this cross-sectoral collaboration can work in practice?
Obviously, we work a lot with our suppliers, with our ingredient suppliers, on water stewardship. We also engage our customers, like the retailers and others on this very important agenda. And some other work that we have been doing was actually inspired by, how do we attract more investment into nature? And maybe not the best analogy if I look at Philip's background picture, but it's like, how do we kill more birds with the same stone? So the starting point for us was we were very much focused on the volumetric benefits of our water replenish programs, right? And, over the years, we have actually learned the co-benefits of water replenishment, co-benefits for biodiversity, co-benefits for tourism, co-benefits on climate, right? And so with the CEO Water Mandate, we have developed a standardized methodology to actually better assess the co-benefits of nature-based solutions that is now in the public domain. We developed it together with partners and consultancy. We put that into the public domain. And the purpose again is to make the business case for investment in nature-based solutions very often in water-related programs by highlighting the multiple co-benefits so that business case works better, so that people understand the entry point, water, to Philip's point, is like something that everyone can relate to, but the benefits are multiple. Hence, the very clear case why we have to continue to invest in water and nature-based solutions. So if the next commission wants to put that into its budget, I don't think anyone will disagree with that.
Thank you, Edward. Claudia, I want to finish with a quote, a very, very short quote if I can. This is from Clara, a female between the ages of 18 and 30. She's one of the citizen participants that was engaged with during the Citizen Voices 2024 Voices Citizen Speak Up project. And Clara says, with water shortages and extreme weather events, the effects of climate change are beginning to show, but nothing is changing. And I should say that Clara is from France. Of course, as I think I mentioned earlier in the call, that many of the most visible climate events that we're seeing are water-based. And so I wonder, Clara could be heading to the polls between the 6th and the 9th of June to make her vote. What's your response to Clara, who's concerned about the pace of action when it comes to driving water resilience across Europe?
So, I'm also giving you a preview. When we are asking this Euro survey, do you think environment degradation is already impacting your daily life? We have a very large majority of the citizens replying, yes, I think it's already impacting my daily life and my health on a daily basis. And if you see who are at the 5 countries which are at the top of responding this are the water scarcity crowd, because water scarcity is already hitting them and they are already seeing them, and it's the most visible, is one of the most visible. I'm not saying is the pollution is already there, etc., but the one that is now more visible that this could impact on a daily basis is water scarcity, and that's why the 5 countries really under water stress are at the top of this. At the same time, as I said, people do not know enough, or they don't feel that know enough, so they might not know that a lot of things are happening. But in terms of how this Clara should approach the 9th of June. What we see when we've seen water discussed in the European Parliament is that is a cross-party theme. Every party took the floor. The 3 times that this has recently been discussed in plenary, all the parties took the floor. So this is a topic for all the parties, but the solutions they offer are not the same. And there we see the nature-based solution versus grey infrastructure, a big cleavage between parties. It's a big difference, a big flagship difference between different political parties, and those are the choices that people need to take. So in that sense, things are happening, more things will happen, but what are the kind of choices I will support? Because on water, I think all the parties will feel compelled to propose things because they see also that their constituencies are worried. So it's about what kind of long-term measures I'm ready to support in with my vote. And indeed, a lot of things are happening at all levels. The pace and scale is what is really will need to be really much bigger.
Great, thank you. And for a second preview as well, I want to thank Philip, Wouter, and Claudia, all 3 of you, for your extremely valuable insights. I've learned a huge amount. What's staying with me as we come to the end of our discussion here is that water is on the agenda, but are we taking the grey infrastructure route? Are we taking the nature restoration route? Equally, the question of governance and redefining value is clearly very important. And we know that citizens care, and this is something that's also echoed in this report, which is available on the Debating Europe website as well. But the question then becomes about empowerment, about mapping out, about recognizing quality and quantity. And I hear also the discussion about the private sector stepping up and the need to, have these proof points of how, by having a collaborative approach to some of these solutions, that you can also highlight the co-benefits and therefore the business case, which I think helps the multiplier effect point be further amplified. But maybe as I'm thinking about my own reflections as we leave here, and I'm sure that all those joining us online are making their own takeaways as well, what stands out to me is the point around narrative, the recognition that it can be done, and that I think, Philip, you said it, water has all that is needed to create a coalition around which we can unite. And I think that's a hopeful message on which to conclude. I'd like to thank all 3 of you for your generous insights and for being so generous with your time as well. You can stay up to date with what Debating Europe is doing by following our Debating Europe social media channels, simply at Debating Europe, to connect, debate, and make your voices heard to shape the political decisions that affect all of our lives. So on that note, thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.